In a Louisiana nursing home in 1999, Paul Edgecombe carries on with a desolate life. He gets a kick out of the chance to bring long strolls outside the nursing home, against their strategy, as he gets a kick out of the chance to visit a specific bungalow close to the nursing home. Paul is fitter and more versatile than the wide range of various occupants of the home. Paul starts to cry while watching the film Formal Hat, after supper at the nursing home. His older companion, Elaine, shows worry for him, and Paul tells her that the film helped him to remember when he was a jail official responsible for death row prisoners at Cold Mountain Prison throughout the late spring of 1935. Flashback to 1935, where Paul works with individual gatekeepers Brutus Efirse Howell, Harry Terwilliger, Bill Evade, and senior member Stanton. The death row is typically called the Last Mile, yet at Cold Mountain, it was classified the Green Mile, as the floor was the shade of blurred limes. The hot seat was named the Old Sparky. 1935 was the most horrendously terrible year for Paul, as he had a urinary contamination. It was an excruciating disease, and Paul felt that each time he went to pee. Percy Wetmore, a savage with a wild attitude, has as of late started working in the death row prisoners block. His kindred gatekeepers disdain him, yet can't dispose of him as a result of his family associations with the lead representative. At some point, John Coffey, a monster African-American man sentenced for physically attacking and killing two youthful white young ladies, shows up waiting for capital punishment. Nonetheless, he is modest, calm, and profound. Different prisoners are Edward, Wharton, Arlen Bitterbuck, Honk, Harry senior member Stanton, and others. Percy is a cruel person man and a gatekeeper in Paul's block. Percy enjoys remarkable bringing up that an individual is waiting for capital punishment and would insult them consistently to help them to remember this reality, attempting to incite them into a battle. Paul attempts to control Percy, without much of any result. In his conviction sheet, it is noticed that two young ladies disappeared from a Louisiana home. The dad, Klaus, William Sadler, and the neighbors send off a manhunt and find John some distance away, inside the wilderness, with the bloodied groups of his two little girls. It is shown that John can detect an individual's set of experiences by connecting with them. It is likewise shown that John was in torment, and was hollering, as he was damaged by what befell the two young ladies. He was stroking their hair, as he lay on the ground sobbing and shouting. John just says that he attempted to take it back, yet it was past the point of no return, demonstrating that he physically attacked the young ladies and killed them. Paul is hitched to January. Brutus and Dignitary find a mouse in the cell block, who conceals in the extra space. Yet, when the extra space is looked, there is no indication of it. The mouse is charming and was a wellspring of diversion for the detainees and Paul and his group. The mouse becomes a close acquaintance with Edward, who names him Mr. Jingles. Edward takes Mr. Jingles for a pet. At the point when Percy becomes acquainted with about this, Percy chooses to kill it definitively on the grounds that it gave pleasure to others' lives. Percy makes a respectable attempt to track down the mouse inside the capacity cell without karma. Mr. Jingles gets extremely well known, and even government officials visit the jail to see him perform. At some point, while Percy was razzying on Edward, Wharton got hold of Percy and taken steps to kill him. Percy got so frightened that he peed in his jeans. Edward couldn't quit chuckling about this, and Percy felt embarrassed. Percy swears vengeance on Edward. As Edward is waiting for capital punishment, he requests that Paul deal with Mr. Jingles while he is no more. Be that as it may, all of a sudden, as Mr. Jingles gets away from Edward's cell, Percy steps on it and kills it. John uncovers unprecedented powers by recuperating Paul's urinary plot contamination and reviving the mouse. Each time John recuperates somebody, a multitude of bugs fly out of his mouth, showing the illness being ousted from his own body. Percy accepts that Brutus and Paul exchanged the mouse. Percy requests to deal with the execution of Edouard Delacroix, Michael Jeter, promising that subsequently, he will move to a managerial post at the Briar Edge Mental Medical Clinic. An understanding is made, however Percy then intentionally subverts the execution. Rather than wetting the wipe used to direct power and make execution speedy and viable, he leaves it dry, making the execution glitch emphatically. Edouard in a real sense fries in the seat and his tissue is cooked from inside his body, and ultimately bursts into flames. Paul's superintendent Hal's significant other is experiencing a cerebrum growth and Hal is upset. Paul persuades Hal to allow Melinda to meet John. Paul uncovers to Hal about how John mended him. Paul then, at that point, persuades his group to divert Percy to John can be rescued once again from his cell block to meet Melinda. Percy is bound and choked and put into isolation, while Wharton is tranquilized and made at lights out time. Afterward, John mends the in critical condition spouse Melinda, Patricia Clarkson, who has a mind growth and it can't be worked upon. Of Superintendent Hal Moores, James Cromwell. At the point when John is approached to make sense of his power, he simply says that he had took it back. Yet this time, the bugs don't escape from John's body after he sucks Melinda's sickness from her body. Brutus realizes that John gulped Melinda's disorder on purpose. At a certain point Wharton holds onto John's arm, and John mystically faculties that Wharton is likewise liable for the wrongdoing for which John was indicted and condemned to death. John reclaims the disorder in Hal's significant other and spews it into Percy, who then at that point shoots Wharton to death and falls into a condition of super durable mental shock. Percy is then confessed to Briar Edge Mental Clinic as a patient. As opposed to a head. Right after these occasions, Paul grills John, who says he rebuffed them awful men and offers to show Paul what he saw. John grasps Paul's hand and says he needs to give Paul a piece of himself, so that Paul might see what truly befell the young ladies. Paul understands that it was Wharton who had killed the two young ladies, after physically attacking them. For his keep-going solicitation on the night prior to his execution, John watches the film Formal Hat. At the point when John is placed in the Paul concurs, shakes his hand, and John is executed. As an old Paul completes his story, he takes note of that he mentioned an exchange to a young confinement community, where he spent the rest of his explanation that he had a completely developed child at that point. And Paul makes sense of that he was 44 years of age at the hour of John's execution, and that he is currently 108. This is evidently a symptom of John to Paul. Mr. Rings, Dell's mouse revived by John, is likewise still alive, yet Paul trusts his outlasting his family members in general and companions, counting Elaine, who is displayed to have kicked the bucket toward the finish.